Episode 4 of the Ahsoka show, Fallen Jedi, is out now, and it's a big one. Spoilers ahead in 3, 2, 1. Star Wars time travel is introduced into live action with The World Between Worlds. Hayden Christensen as Anakin is back, Rey Stevenson as Baylan continues to be fantastic, and Marrok turns out to be a zombie, powered by Nightsister magic. Fallen Jedi is an absolutely brilliant episode, and I'd probably go as far as to say it's my favourite episode since the Mando Season 2 finale, with Anakin's reveal at the end of the episode being similar to that of Luke Skywalker's in The Mandalorian. So first we'll break down a plot, then go into my ratings and discuss the positives and negatives of the episode. We pick up from where episode 3 left off, with Ahsoka, Sabine and Huyang fixing their ship on the planet Cetos. Ahsoka decides that they should head to the Stonehenge-like structure in order to stop Morgan Elsbeth from using the star map to travel to Thrawn's location. Huyang is fixing the ship when he is ambushed by Morgan's assassin droids. He manages to alert Ahsoka and Sabine, and they quickly take out the ambushers and head through the forest towards Baylan, who is protecting the star map as it is calculating the hyperspace route for Morgan Elsbeth's hyperspace station, the Eye of Sion. Before they leave Huyang at the ship, he tells Ahsoka and Sabine to stick together, words which foreshadow the rest of the episode.
Stay together. You always did better that way, in my opinion.
Back at the New Republic fleet, Hera rebels against her orders by boarding the Ghost and heading to Ahsoka's location, alongside Carson Teva and 4 other X-Wing pilots.
Thanks for joining the party, Carson.
Wouldn't miss it, General. You know, you're risking an awful lot by doing this.
On Cetos, Ahsoka faces Marrok, and Sabine has a rematch against Shin. Sabine, now in her Mandalorian armour, chooses to fight Shin with her blasters, until Shin force pushes her against a tree. Ahsoka defeats Marrok with a perfectly timed strike and kills him. And as often as is the case, the many fan theories of who Marrok was behind the mask were all completely wrong. Marrok seems to be a reanimated Sith Inquisitor, imbued with dark magic. Which will now lead to even more theories about Marrok, as we still don't know who he was and how the Nightsister magic controlled him. Sabine tells Ahsoka to find the star map, and the pair split up, which is where all goes wrong for the Master and Padawan. Ahsoka reaches a henge and confronts Baylan, and after some very interesting dialogue between Baylan and Ahsoka, where Baylan's intriguing backstory as the next Jedi is referenced, Ahsoka draws her lightsaber, and much to Baylan's reluctance, the pair fight. Meanwhile, Sabine and Shin continue their duel, and Sabine is once again knocked to the ground by Shin. Sabine raises her hand as she tries to use the Force, but to Shin's surprise, Sabine is still unable to use the Force.
You have no power.
When Shin is distracted, Sabine uses her wrist rocket and disarms her. Shin then flees, heading to support Baylan at the star map's location, with Sabine in pursuit. Ahsoka manages to remove the star map from the henge, and in the process, it burns her hand. This turns the battle in Baylan's favour, and he uses brute force to power Ahsoka towards the edge of the cliff. Shin arrives at the henge, and Ahsoka, believing that Shin killed Sabine, tunes into the dark side, and force pushes Shin into a rock. Baylan, enraged by this, corners Ahsoka, and just as Sabine arrives, his lightsaber swing knocks Ahsoka off the cliff edge. Sabine has a star map in her hand, and Baylan manages to convince her to give him the map, by saying it's the only way to get to Ezra. Baylan restarts the star map cycle, and the Eye of Sion's hyperspace route is complete. Baylan, Shin, and their prisoner Sabine join Morgan Elsbeth on the Eye of Sion. Hera and her X-Wings try to intercept the Eye of Sion, but it activates the hyperdrive before they can do anything. We then see Ahsoka wake up from what at first appears to be in the water below the cliff where Baylan struck her down, but it actually turns out to be the world between worlds, a place outside of time that Ezra used years ago to save Ahsoka from a clash with Vader in Star Wars Rebels.
Ahsoka! Ahsoka?
Ezra?
Ahsoka stands up, turns around, and sees Anakin. So a pretty massive episode overall, and a great return to form after last week's rather timid installment. With a dark tone that reminds me of the ending of Empire Strikes Back, with Ahsoka and Sabine being separated, Morgan and co entering hyperspace, heading towards Thrawn, and a New Republic nowhere in sight. A real tense, enticing episode, which makes me very excited for episode 5, which is directed by Filoni himself, and reportedly has a much longer runtime. Before going over my takeaways for the episode, here are the ratings. Plot scores 9, entertainment value 10, characters and performances 9, visuals 10, sound gets 10, and the ending scores 10. And I'm giving a rare bonus point for the lightsaber fights, which in my opinion are the best lightsaber duels we've seen in a Disney Star Wars era. There were some phenomenal clashes of different lightsaber forms, and each duel had the choreography of the prequels and the pathos of the originals. Almost every single swing of each lightsaber, whether it was between Ahsoka and Marrok, Sabine and Shin, or Baylan and Ahsoka, they all had such weight. Which leaves my overall score for the episode at a very, very high 98%. Now, on to the positives. So there's a lot of positives to get through, and firstly, I would be remiss if I didn't start with Rey Stevenson as Baylan. His one-word answers to Morgan Elsbeth just shows how a great actor can add so much to an average script. His pauses, his presence, and his gravitas makes him such a fascinating character. I do, however, feel a real tinge of sadness whenever Baylan is on screen, as obviously Rey Stevenson passed away a few months ago. So regardless of further Ahsoka seasons, or Dave Filoni's film in a few years' time, we are only going to be getting 4 more episodes of the character, which is a real shame, as he's definitely a favourite of mine. This episode was full of tension from minute 1. With Ahsoka staring out into the forest, you could feel the inevitability of the upcoming battle. Ahsoka cutting through the Inquisitor's spinning lightsaber was reminiscent of Obi-Wan's fight against Maul in Star Wars Rebels. And then Marrok turning into green magic dust and letting out a scream that even surprised Shin. It was a great moment. I've also got to mention the music from Kevin Kiner. He is just brilliant. His score really builds up the tension of the episode, and like the first season of The Mandalorian, I am staying through the credits just to hear his score. Kiner's use of blending classic Star Wars melodies with ominous wind flutes and percussion instruments transitions the scenes so beautifully, making them flow from one to the next. Along with Rey Stevenson and David Tennant as Huyang, Kevin Kiner is one of the standout parts of the show. Despite me really not liking that Sabine survived Shin's lightsaber stab in episode 1, I have to admit that it sets up a real good rivalry between the two apprentices. They play an adversarial duet that works really well, and now with Sabine being groomed to the dark side by Baylan, perhaps as another or a replacement apprentice, the resulting jealousy from Shin will hopefully be explored throughout the rest of the season. There were, as always, some fantastic visuals in this episode. As I've said in my reviews for the first 3 episodes, you can really see Dave Filoni's experience creating backgrounds in his animated shows, and he's carried this through to his first live-action series, with the vistas for Ahsoka just being brilliant. And lastly, I must mention and give credit to Peter Ramsey, the director for this episode. The choreography, pacing, and shots were great. and for a director who up to now has almost exclusively worked on animated shows and films, he knocked this live action episode out of the park. My favourite shot was when Sabine's Mandalorian helmet was in focus, while Sabine and Shin fight in the background, perhaps showing that Sabine has moved on from her Mandalorian culture to now being more of a Jedi, or perhaps it shows the opposite. Even when she's using a lightsaber, her Mandalorian heritage is never far away. I really could not be more excited for the second half of the season, but as always, I like to give some balance in my reviews. So now, we can move on to the negatives. So the episode runtime continues to be an issue. Where last week's episode was 29 minutes, this episode was 33 minutes long, when taking out the recap and the end credits. And that's just simply not long enough for such an epic and large-scale show that Ahsoka is turning out to be. The 30-minute episode again, I mean come on. Sitcoms have longer runtimes, and they have 24 episodes per season. Also, Hera is continuing to be a very cringy character for me. Mary Elizabeth Winstead is a big miscast, and I'm getting an irrational dislike for the start of Hera's chirpy, more upbeat theme song when it kicks in, as I know that when that song starts, Hera will soon be on screen. I could happily fast forward her and Jason's scenes to get back to the far more interesting characters like Baylan and Ahsoka. And my last negative is that although it's improved, the dialogue is still heavy and wooden. For some characters, this works, such as Huyang, Baylan and Elsbeth, but for Ahsoka and Sabine, their dialogue together is very stiff.
Don't worry about me.
I'm not. Good. Should I be?
What?
Worried.
Nope.
Episode 4 by far and away is the best episode this season, and it seems that the setup stage is now done, and we'll be heading into the crazy World Between Worlds, New Beyond, Thrawn phase of the season, which could be brilliant, or it could be full of plot holes, as the timey-wimey World Between Worlds is certainly something that could cause huge problems narratively for the show and Star Wars as a whole. But it could also be absolutely fantastic and exciting. This episode is ranked up there with the Mandalorian Season 2 finale for me, as it shares many similarities with that episode, with big battles and a surprise twist at the end, with Anakin coming back. It's perhaps an even more interesting reveal than Luke's in The Mandalorian, as none of the characters actually knew who Luke was. They possibly knew of him, but they had no relationship with him. Whereas Anakin and Ahsoka have an incredibly rich backstory and relationship, which makes their reunion so meaningful. Anakin, as we know, is a very complex character, so it becomes more interesting when you wonder whether it's light side Anakin or dark side Anakin in a World Between Worlds. And also, how did he get there? How did Ahsoka get there? And could we see other characters who are canonically dead at this point in the Star Wars timeline? There are just so many questions, which if answered well, then the series could be transformative to Disney Star Wars. On the series leaderboard, Ahsoka has now overtaken Mando Season 3, The Witcher Season 1, and A Crown Season 4. I'm hoping it can break into the top 8 and potentially the top 5 if the rest of the season continues on a similar level to Episode 4. Compared to other Star Wars Disney Plus shows, Ahsoka is now in 6th place, just below The Bad Batch Season 2. If it can climb above The Bad Batch and potentially enter the top 3, then we're looking at a really great show. So overall, I'm a very happy Star Wars fan, which is something I think many of us haven't been able to say for a while, since Disney took over the franchise. And now I would love to know, what are your thoughts on this episode? How would you rate Fallen Jedi out of 100? And is the Ahsoka series meeting or even exceeding your expectations so far? Let me know in the comments below. If you're new here, then perhaps consider subscribing to Film Club. I'll be reviewing every episode of Ahsoka over the next few weeks. And I'll be reviewing the movie The Creator later this month, which is directed by Rogue One director Gareth Edwards. Thank you for watching, and see you again.